Start off with, I would like to read our national anthem. I think that's really important, and if you can, this is the second time it's been read. I'm not sure if others have it, but it will be read today, and our colors are available. Our Father gave us our national colors, our nation's mascot, and our nation's sacred word. So we'll be reading that, as well as some of the things on the agenda today is the Rubino motion that was placed in the Let My Words Be Known letter. He expressed that everyone should have knowledge of this motion, and we'll explain the motion, when it was put in. That's Zenfist just emailed. He said he found Ustream post of classes. Did I miss you making this? Okay, no. Okay, well, no, we're online now, Zenfest, so don't worry about it. That the Ustream is the live classes that we have from the embassy. We have questions and answer classes that we have from the embassy. So whatever you see on Ustream is for the live video classes, and we'll be starting those up as well. But our main objective, of course, is to really bring people up to date with what's going on as far as our Father's freedom. So back to the Rubino's motion. He said in the letter, "Let my words be known," in his letter, that people should be very familiar with the motion, and that will be going over today. It was done in 2003, which Judge Hugh Lawson, which was the bond hearing, preliminary hearings, where our Father put it on record of his status as indigenous and his sovereignty and him being a secure party. And the attorney that worked at the time was Frank Rubino, who's an international attorney, and we met with him a few weeks ago. He was one of the ones that put in the strongest lack of jurisdiction. It was a motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction. And we're combing through this motion again to make sure that it's perfected for the international court. We are not done with the international court and communicating with them. We'll address that as well. We'll also address the ledgers. We'll also address the strategies that is being placed in motion, which involves everyone. It's more so not necessarily strategy, but facts and truth. So the strategies and the facts, the strategy was already laid out by our president, making the moves that he made, putting the paperwork in, creating a paper trail, stating it on record, and all of that was done by him in his own time, which is why a lot of this is just coming up now. When you're dealing with the motions, the Rubino motions, a lot of that information, torture suits, those were 2003, 2002, and we'll get into that as on this show. So we want to start off with the anthem. Our anthem is our national anthem. I pledge my allegiance to the flag of the United Wnuwapu Nation and to free choice and self-determination. Make our nation great and strong, bold to defend forever the cause of freedom and actual facts for which it stands. One nation of indigenous sovereign peoples, fearless and honest people under the sky and upon the earth, with freedom, justice, and equality for us all, with free will and might forevermore. I think some email came in. We'll be addressing the emails as they come in. Let everyone know to click the WNW radio, the radio section, That's when you want to make sure everyone, just tell them to click the radio section. Soon as they come on, when you get on the site, in the upper left hand corner, you'll see what you now playing. Basically, that's just is now playing, and once you see that, then you can click that and tune in. Make sure I'll put questions and answer class up there so they can see that is a questions and answer class. We just want to make sure everyone is on the same page. We have a few. Let me just adjust this so people will know. I don't want any issues. Hold on one second, family.
And a million other Christian movements, why have they not?
Wu-nuwaupu Nashad.
It's a class up in the upper left-hand corner. So those that would like to know if you're communicating with anyone. Okay, that's our national anthem. I pledge my allegiance to the flag of the United Wnuwaupu Nation and to free choice and self-determination. Make our nation great and strong, bold to defend forever the cause of freedom and actual facts for which it stands. One nation of indigenous sovereign people, fearless and honest, people under the sky and upon the earth, with freedom, justice, and equality for us all, with free will and might forevermore. Written by the hand of Chief Black Eagle, His Excellency Reverend Dr. Malachi Z.K. York. The nation's colors are black, Kamam, red, Hamar, gold, Nabat, white, Laban. And our nation's mascot is the sacred bird, the phoenix bird. The resurrection, it symbolizes the resurrection, Benan, or Ben, the Bennu bird. Our nation's sacred word is Huhi. That's Huhi, the wind of life and living. Hayat, breath of life. And the phoenix bird, which is the significance behind the phoenix bird, is to rebuild. We're rebuilding our nation. The nation, again, we're just emphasizing a lot of what was touched on yesterday about our nation being in exile, our government being in exile, and addressing the international community regarding our sovereignty, our retained sovereignty. Our retained sovereignty from, as Yamasee, Native Americans, or indigenous tribes, various tribes that existed in the 16, 17, 18, really back to the 1400s. These tribes, the indigenous people, existed for thousands of years, but more so recorded in context of coming in contact with the Confederacy. And the motion which was put together addresses how most of Georgia was the home of Native Americans, and it belonged to a Southern alliance known as the Creek Confederacy and the Creek Nation, also known as Muskegee. And the tribes that were part of the Confederacy were the Creek, they were the Hichiti, Ekakfua, Kashta, or Kasita, Oshoki, Okmoji, Yamasee, or Jemisi, also pronounced with the J at times, the Yuhi tribes, the Guala tribes, and the Apalochicolo, and the Chiaha tribes. And these tribes formed an alliance to defend themselves from the settlers coming into the land, massacring tribes. So this alliance was created in the south southeastern part of Georgia, or the southeastern part of the nation. The 18th century, 17th century, 16th century. And the motion also expresses a lot of the information that came out of course, Let's Set the Record Straight. You have the Yamasee tribes of Native Americans who are of the Creek Nation. We were the original mound builders. We had mounds built in Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, South Carolina, Oklahoma, and various states. And what happens, if you look at the picture of Chief Black Eagle, you'll see in the upper left-hand corner, you'll find the Rock Eagle Mound, which was a few minutes from our native land. I mean, Tamaray or Wahani. You'll see that there. So when you look at that, this is not something new. And this is why that makes this case so significant, is because it's been 20, 25 years worth of paper trail regarding this particular fight. So it's impossible for us to lose. This was pre-planned, and establishing ourselves as sovereign, establishing our nation as acknowledging it for the U.S. government and other governments have acknowledged our indigenous status and sovereignty as a nation, and regardless of whether they acknowledge it on paper or what people may claim we haven't found in the documents. I read somewhere a brother said, well, it's not in the BIA. That's not true. I have the document in front of me where we are registered with the United States government, and we don't have to register. They don't have to acknowledge us in that sense. It's not something that we're asking, and that has to be emphasized as well. We've never asked for acknowledgement by them. When they came, they acknowledged and knew that who we were, and went into treaties with us because they needed our resources. And we read a part of it from where our president explained the things that they needed us for, such as the knowledge of the mountain trails, knowledge of the land, the right foods to eat, how to plant, the seasons, the hunting. All of that was a part of their need and acknowledgement of us being indigenous, and using their schemes and manipulation to confiscate our land. So this is not a new practice. So just to make it clear, when people say, "Are we registered with the U.S.?" We come before them. The United Nations Charter didn't come into existence until 1945. So the acknowledgement of nations didn't establish itself until that time period, where you had so-called member states. We existed thousands of years before they even thought about creating what they called this U.S. In fact, they had to fight to establish their government against the British rule. The American Revolution, they had to fight on our land, and it was Native Americans that were involved with that. So we even helped them fight against independence from British rule. I'm not sure when the American Revolution was happened. I'm not good with American history. I'm good with our story, and I know that we helped them break away from Britain, and then they established their government. And in establishing their government, we recognized them. They didn't have to recognize us. It's already a known fact. Any historian knows that. So people sound foolish when they say and ask questions like, does the U.S. recognize you? Yes, the U.S. recognizes us. They had to have recognized us in order to even establish themselves here. The fact that they exist shows that they recognize us. So when you're dealing with the Yamasee, back to the point discussion of the filing, you're dealing with the Yamasee. You can see it states in there a lot of the facts that came out to set the record straight, and what our master put out in several newspapers and flyers. But we did have those mounds built in Louisiana. One is called Poverty Point. You can look that up. Fig Island Shell Ring, that's in South Carolina. And Hiwassee Island in Tennessee. We're just naming a few. The Yamasee, as you know, just to reiterate, are the Olmecs. They're descendants of the Olmecs, who, as our father explained, came from the Nubans, who evolved. So our evolution, the Yamasee's descendancy and bloodline, stemming to the Olmecs, evolved way back to the oldest fossil found, known as the Moropithecus bishopi in Uganda, where the oldest fossils have been found. They're 20.6 million years old. So it's foolish for someone to say, do they recognize us? They know exactly who we are. Now, over time, of course, the Olmecs, in their migration, they went to all various islands as well, and spread to particularly two areas. One group went to the Bermuda, near the Bermuda Triangle, the islands near the Bermuda Triangle, and known as Jamaica, where our Nuwaupians are, Haiti, where our Nuwaupians are, Trinidad, Barbados. Other areas that the Olmecs settled in was Southeast America, and they were known as the Washoe, where you get Washita, meaning raccoon people. And they were in the areas of Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. When the Malians came over, they mixed in with the Washaw, which produced the Yamasee. And they were pure-blooded black Native American tribe. The Yamasee, of course, is the mother tribe of all black southeastern and eastern tribes that resided in Georgia, as we do today. The Yamasee were direct descendants of the Olmecs through the Wichita Moors, or the Wichita, not necessarily Moors. That's a religious denotation. The Wichita tribes. And the Yamasee lived in Georgia, Okomaji River, near Macon. And near Macon, you'll find a lot of the early mounds discovered there. Currently, Rock Eagle Mound in Edenton marks the home of the Yamasee. The Creeks, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Catawbas, the Cherokees, all descended from the Yamasee. When the British, the French, and Spaniards mixed into many of these tribes in the 1700s. This is where the name York comes from. The name York comes from that family that Lewis and Clark was adopted or enslaved to. Ben York was enslaved to that family. That's where the name York picks up. The Yamasee Creeks, who moved to what is known as Savannah, they became known as the Yamacraw. Now, our story explains how the Native Americans, the British kidnapped Native Americans, women and children, to enslave them. And many of the Native Americans began to mix in with kidnapped Africans. And these kidnapped Africans escaped from their captors. And in 1715, which was explained to the United Nations last week, and it was laid on record how the Yamasee, that this war was not something new. This war has been going on. It's something that's been taking place, and the hate from the British we've been feeling since then, since that war that took place. They knew that the Yamasee was not going to. They knew that the Yamasee was not going to mix in. They knew that. And in knowing that, they know that we still exist. And that's the gap where they couldn't necessarily pinpoint, because after the Trail of Tears, through our migrations, the bloodline of the Yamasee has been spread abroad. And until our chief, Black Eagle, called out for his indigenous people, and in our acknowledgement of him as our chief and president, which is the same chief, head of state, they call the chief the president, right? When that happened and he called out for his indigenous people, we came together, and those that were there, remember, we had powwows where we would congregate and acknowledge our indigenous cultures and practice those indigenous cultures. And it has always been a part of our system. If you look at the system and how it's ran, our culture, our nation, we still practice those practices of our indigenous people, where the men protected our women, provided and protected for them. Our women had a certain job that they did. The men had a job, and we did our job effectively. The women did their jobs effectively. Our chief was protected. And we took orders from our chief and president in our government. All of that, if those that's been around and even now it still exists, that our chief, we get our commands, our directions from him through the administration, which is the government, and passed on to his nation. Same as any other government that has been operating. So we established that in 1992 when we voted him in the acknowledgement of our indigenous rights, our indigenous status, and our retained sovereignty. So this is what you're signing to in acknowledgement. Even today, you're still acknowledging that we have our own president, and the U.S. government has no jurisdiction over our affairs. And this has to be spread worldwide. And this is what we're up against, because they're constantly using their so-called jurisdiction to imprison our chiefs and imprison our tribal nation members. The same tactics. So in 1715, the Yamasee went into war with the British, known as the Yamasee Uprising. Look it up. In letters written to a newspaper in 1858, known as the Montgomery Mail, J.G. Kleiner of Tennessee, he states to the Indian historian, U.S. Army General Tom Woodward, he states, I passed a night at the house of Mr. Stephen Richards in West Florida, who was an interpreter during the Seminole War and had passed much of his life among the Indians. He gives the same account substantially of the migrations of Indians from west of the Mississippi that General Woodward does. He thinks he located the Yamasee. I write from memory, in the middle and eastern portions of Florida, and says they were occupying the country when the Creeks came. He describes the Yamasee as having dark skins and woolly hair and coarse hair, thick lips and flat feet, and as having inferior implements of wars to the Creeks. Our president, Malachi York, is the chief of the Yamasee tribe of Native Americans, also known as the United Wnuwaupu Nation, a tribe of the Creek Confederacy. Furthermore, our president, Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, Chief Black Eagle, has been recognized by 5 primary chiefs of the United Wichita Dedugo Demoindia. I'm going to repeat that. Dedugo Demoindia, which comprised of the Wichita Empire. And these petitions declares Chief Black Eagle as the commander-in-chief and head of state. And this is a 2003 filing. This is a 2003 filing. So for those that say this is new, popping up and claiming that they know what's going on, they really don't. Because this is paperwork that our president had on record with bluebacks, affidavits from chiefs all across this land, acknowledging him as who he is. So this is not something new. So stop this is for us, our nation, to defend our position, to make sure that people understand who and what we are. When it comes to, backing up, they acknowledge him as Chief Black Eagle, as the Commander-in-Chief and Head of State of Indigenous Yamasee Native American, of the Native American government, and we have it in our Constitution, the United Wnuwapu Nation, and it has been signed by at that point, it was over 2,500 indigenous peoples. Now, we're gathering the 30,000, because there's other indigenous peoples that have recognized their chief, which we're doing now, gathering those tribal ledgers. So Dr. York submits that as the chief of the, I'm coming out of the, I'm not reading it word for word, I'm just coming out of the motion, submits that as the chief of the Native American tribe of Indians, he is exempt from the prosecution of the United States based upon the jurisdictional theories of foreign sovereign immunity, head of state immunity, and American Indian reservation immunity. His Excellency Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, as the president and chief of the Yamasee tribe of Native Americans, president of the United Wnuwapu Nation, traces his heritage back to Old York from 1756, who lived to 1861, through Old York's son Ben York. And it's all documented and attached to this filing. The Empress stated that she is related to Ben York, who is the Empress we're talking about, Verdice Tiara. She's a Wichita Turner, known as from Gauston El Bay. She lives in Louisiana. The Empress states that she is related to Ben York in her book entitled Return of the Ancient Ones. If you read it, the Return of the Ancient Ones, which is one of the books that he expressed that we did get, page 197. And this empress was the one that was able to retrieve her land from the French government when they illegally purchased the so-called Louisiana Purchase. She showed that she has the deeds and is the heir to the descendants of that purchase, the original deed owners. She's the last living relative of that, and she has acknowledged her relation to Ben York, who our president is related to. That's where the name Ben York or York came from the British, who adopted it through Lewis and Clark and was given to Ben York as he traveled with Lewis and Clark through their expeditions. It was the reason why he was able to speak so many different languages, and that's why they had him. Not the reason why he was able to speak so many different languages, but the reason why they had him was because he was able to speak the different Native American tongues, and they were not able to communicate and go through these different tribes without being killed or removed from the lands because of the distrust of the Europeans that the natives had. So Ben York accompanied them on his in his travels with Lewis and Clark. And look, you can look that story up. Matter of fact, Let's Set the Record Straight clearly points out all of the facts needed to tie everything in. And our descendant, the facts are there. So when you read page 197, a washerwoman, Anna Marie, was the legal Wichita wife of Joseph de Mason Rouge. She was the mother of Henry Turner. York was her half-brother. So a washerwoman was the legal Wichita wife of Joseph de Mason Rouge, and York was her half-brother. Now, Ben Ali, who became known as Ben York, he was the son of Abdullah ibn Ali from 1756 to 1880. He was also called Old York, and Warda Salem Idris, who became known as Rose. His father was a Malian who was brought to America when he was 18 years old during the Moroccan slave trade in 1774, and his mother was a washerwoman of the Washita tribes. Ben York was the half-brother of a washerwoman. Of course, this washerwoman is known as, we just gave information, her name was Anna Marie. Of course, looking at the name, that's not her native name, but her half-brother was Ben York. Anna Marie was the daughter of Ayim Maria, the old empress during the Lewis and Clark expeditions, of which Ben York was of course the linguist and translator. He actually helped a Shoshone woman by the name of, those that remember, Sacagawea. He took many Native American wives. He had many. One of his wives was from the Arikara tribe called Blackfeather. She was given to him by the Arikara chief, Arikara, Arikara chief. Blackfeather and Ben York gave birth to a daughter. Named Diane Fletcher, who went and lived amongst the Kiowa tribe of Native Americans. Ben York also had a son named Washaki from Sacagawea and of the Shoshone tribe. His descendants became known as the Yorks and the Williams of the Virginia. Mary Williams was from Boston. The Yorks, the Williams are cousins. All of this ties in to the Yamasee, actually, which, if people do not know this, look it up. The Yamasee tribes also stems to Ghana. There's tribes in Ghana called the Jemasi. These are the Jemasi tribes over there, which is Yamasi. The Y and the J is interchangeable, which we'll get into. And also know that Boston, where they say our president was born, when you look at Boston, if you type in Google, what is the sister city of Boston, you'll see it's Takoradi. Takoradi is the sister city of Boston. Meaning in the early 18 and 1900s, but prior to planes, you had sister cities that will port to different cities as they traveled across the oceans. Ben York traveled to Roxborough, Massachusetts, and then to Virginia in search of his son, Washaki. When they finally met in Wyoming, Ben York continued migrating west. Later, he lived for a while in Pennsylvania, leaving his family, who became known as the Williams. So Ben York's family, because he had so many different children and so many different wives, his bloodline is all over this nation. He traveled to Louisiana as the Washingtons and to South Carolina as the Millers and to Boston, New Bedford, Massachusetts as Yorks, and finally he returned to Virginia, where he later died in Richmond, Virginia in the fall of 1893. 1893. That's about a century ago, at the age of 114. As previously stated, His Excellency Dr. Malachi Z.K. York claims his title as the President and Chief of the Yamasee Tribe of Native Americans, the United Wnuwaupu Nation, through the above lineage to support his claim. Malachi York is recognized as Maku, Chief Black Eagle, by the 5 primary chiefs of the United Washita Dedugda Mundia, which comprise the nation of the Washoe, the Washita Empire, Nanya Zakor El, Nin Tahida El, Nanya Molak El, and Nanya Ishmael El, and Nanya Amir El. Malachi York believes that his position as the president and chief of the United Wnuwapu Nation of Native Americans and indigenous peoples, he should be accorded immunity from prosecution. Dr. Malachi, as an indigenous Native American, believes that the United States District Court lacks jurisdiction to try him, since pursuant to the United States Constitution, he should be tried by a jury of his peers, which he stated on record on June 30th. That jury, of course, would be a jury of Native Americans. Malachi York has been in contact with various representatives of the Navajo Nation of Native Americans in an effort to have his case tried before their tribal court. Now, what's funny about the master just expressed how the Navajo are so mixed in with Europeans that they don't even consider themselves as the original seed any longer. They can't, because they mixed in. And they were actually in Geneva last week copying our, not necessarily attack, but our addressing the floor of the United Nations. They mimicked our method and how we addressed the U.S., because 2 days later they came with the same method which was read yesterday, what we read to the nation and was presented to the floor of the United Nations and given to the expert mechanism as an intervention. The Navajo copy our method, the Yamasee, of course. So we were in contact with those representatives of the Navajo Nation to have the trial tried before their tribal courts. They did accept jurisdiction if it were conceded to them by the United States. So, but of course the Navajo has a problem with the indigenous tribes of original people who we are, and nothing came out of that, but there was just a discrepancy in reference to that. It's undecided, as of this motion states, it was undecided by the Navajo Council. But our president just recently mentioned about the Navajo and them being at the UN as the European really representatives of Native Americans. They kind of more so control the Navajo, the tribes and other tribes, but they do not control the Yamasee, the Shoshone, Wichita tribes. They never did, based on our Creek Confederacy and our alliance to defeat the British and march them off of our lands, which we are doing right now. Even as we fight, in this case, it's the same situation. We can move forward with the motion. It's the memorandum of law in support of the defendant's motion to dismiss. The defendant, no, we'll skip down to part one. This is, let me see. Hold on, family, 1 second. I'm just flipping through this. A few cases were cited in this motion, and a few laws, U.S. laws, such as, it's a law, I mean, actually it's an act, not a law. It's a Foreign States Immunity Act, 28 U.S.C. 1602. The Congress finds that the determination by the United States courts of the claims of foreign states to immunity from the jurisdiction of such courts will serve the interests of justice and will protect the rights of both foreign states and litigants in the United States courts. And this is one of the founding supporting acts that was placed in this motion to support our president's position as the U.S. having lack of jurisdiction, because there is an act, it's called the Foreign States Immunity Act, FSIA, and the 28 U.S.C. 1602, that's the code, a number where you can look it up. And this act was designed to promote harmonious international relations by respecting governmental immunities recognized in international law, while permitting claims arising out of ordinary commercial activities. Hold on one second, family. An email came in. I just want to read it really quick. Okay, someone asked about accessing the radio station from their iPod. I don't know if your iPod has internet connection, but QuickTime, you should be able to, this is Sadiq L at YMail. You should be able to log on from an iPod that has internet connection. I'm not sure about the Android tablet. I know the iPad you're able to log on, and your iPhone. So if someone can assist the brother, it's his email is sadiql at ymail.com. That's SAADIQEL at ymail.com. That's SAADIQEL at ymail.com. Assist the brother if anyone knows or has any information on accessing the radio station from the iPod or his Android tab. Okay. Now back to this motion. And this motion, this FSIA, it was designed to promote harmonious international relations by respecting governmental immunities, which we have, and it's recognized by international law, which we know, while permitting claims arising out of ordinary commercial activities. And there was a law here, well, a case, Pullman Construction Industries versus the United States, based on what's being read, that this Pullman construction industry is a foreign entity, and this act would have been used in this case, or was used in this case, to show that the U.S. does recognize Foreign States Immunity Act. The policy of the United States, as codified in the FSIA, is to grant immunity from suit in the courts of the United States to foreign states and corporations owned by such foreign states for acts taken pursuant to their sovereign power, even though they impact the United States. Hamel Bank versus PT Bank Negara, Indonesia. The immunity granted to foreign states extends to individuals acting within the scope of their official duties in serving their foreign state. An argument has been supported by several circuits that the Foreign States Immunity Act only deals with immunity from civil suits, and that the act's silence regarding criminal acts means that the Congress did not intend to prevent the courts of the United States from exercising jurisdictions in federal criminal actions. And that's in Southway versus the Central Bank of Nigeria, United States versus Hendron. The opposite view has been adopted by other circuits, stating that the Foreign States Immunity Act applied to criminal and civil actions alike. So this motion goes into supporting cases that the U.S. acknowledges that this act gives immunity to foreign head of states in civil actions, but the argument will be from the U.S. that the criminal acts, alleged criminal acts from a foreign head of state or corporation acting in the capacity of that entity, foreign state or corporation, or any individual acting on their behalf, is not immune. But in international law, they are immune. Matter of fact, they're internationally protected, regardless of if they thought or if they feel that our foreign nation, which we are, a foreign state, look up the word nation in international law, and I can read it to you right fast. The definition of a nation. And this is important, so when people, you'll be able to answer the questions. And we'll read it from a regular dictionary or definitionary. A nation, aggregate of people united by common descent. Common descent, history, culture, or language. Inhabiting a particular country or territory. You follow that? So, even in their own definitions, a nation is an aggregate of people. And people want to know what aggregate is. This is how we dissect and we defeat this beast by knowing what we're talking about and doing our diligent studies. So when it's time to present ourselves, well, it's time, not when it's time. Now the time to present ourselves as a nation. We'll all be on the same page, and this is what our president wants. It's basically an aggregate it's a formed by the conjunction or collection of particulars into a whole mass, which Nuwaupians have and which we've done. So by definition of in their words, it's a aggregate of people united by a common descent, which is proven through our bloodline, which is proven through our descent. It's proven through our cultural practices. And it's proven by our president reestablishing those cultures from his bloodline as an indigenous sovereign person and reinstilling those inside of the nation of Nuwaupians, which we are, and we have commonly brought ourselves together, which one of the main commonalities that we have is our language. Nuwaupu, our language, and we inhabited a particular territory, which was our 476 acres indigenous land by Rock Eagle Mound, which was a marker for the Yamasee. So we are a nation, and though we are not members, and let's make sure we get this in our heads, though we're not members of the United Nations, because we haven't signed on, we're still considered and recognized as a nation because of the fact that we exist and we are a sovereign nation. But in international courts, international laws, they consider nations as states. That's what they call states. Anytime they say the state of Syria or the state of Liberia, in international communication, it's considered a state or nation state. So when you hear that term, you don't make it parallel or synonymous with United States, federal states. That's not what it is. Even though they were created, they created their own territories and they do have their own jurisdiction. They united all of those states under the corporation of the United States government. But our nation state has always retained sovereignty. You can never rule the Yamasee or any Native American tribes because our laws are not conducive to your laws. Their laws are totally different from our laws. Our laws are natural laws. Our way is the natural way. And that our laws, you look in Patrak, you'll see we follow natural law. All indigenous people followed and accepted natural law, things that were natural to them, natural nature. That's what we accepted. It always conflicted, their laws conflicted with us because it's not natural. It was always based on how they felt at the particular time or how they favored a particular law. If it was advantageous to the lawmaker, that lawmaker in the 1800s, a lot of those laws are outdated and they're based on racial discrimination and hate towards the indigenous people. So it's impossible for any of indigenous tribes of the Native of Americas to practice any of the laws or follow any of the laws of their government, because their government does not play fair. We have to get killed and murdered, and Dr. Martin Luther King has to get shot. We have to march from Alabama to Washington, D.C. We have to petition. We have to hold up signs. We have to riot. We have to do all of those things in order for us to be recognized in their government. We gave them the opportunity. Africans that were brought to this country gave them years of opportunity to get themselves together, play fair in their judicial system, play fair in their governmental bodies, rule justly, and they have never done that. So there's no way possible that any indigenous Native American, especially the Yamasee Wichita Mound Builders, under our president, accept any of their laws to govern us, because it goes against our nature. And that's why we're having such a hard time, because we will never conform to their way of life. We've always had our own way of life. We've always had our laws, and we've always practiced them before they came here and set up their fake system that was only geared to their rule, and they called it the Manifest Destiny. The Manifest Destiny was an ideology of Europeans and the British that came here, and they wanted to expand their government across this land by any means necessary. So the principles of this government and the laws that was established here is based on racism. It's based on hate. It's based on control and manipulation. And that's why Nuwaupians who are working in their system, you can never find liberty working in their system, because it goes against what you're about. It goes against your essence. It goes against your soul. It goes against the fact that your president is incarcerated, and we're not doing anything. We're not doing enough. And I'm not saying anything, because we are, but we're not doing enough. So when this back to this motion, it's all tying in with this motion, when they decided to use their laws to govern and try to incarcerate our president, which they did kidnap. They didn't incarcerate, they kidnapped him and tried to force him under their jurisdiction. And being the being that he is, the love and the sacrifice he had for us, he never signed any of their motions. He never signed anything on paper. When they brought him into court, they forced him there. You can see the video they tried to put out and make it seem like he willingly came into court and he willingly took a plea. All of that was crap. That was a small snippet of 5 or 10 minutes when he was in court. They didn't show the torture that he was going through before he walked in the doors, how the handcuffs was on him tight, where he was sleeping at 3 hours before then, how he couldn't get any sleep, who was around him, the type of defamation of the media, the discrimination and the hate and the guiltiness they attached to him, even in the holding cells, showing it on television at 5 o'clock when everyone is eating. They all in a chow hall and they turn it on at 5 o'clock, and his face is on there, and he's being told about his tribe and his nation, his family members from his governmental body having to take charges, their children being taken away from them. He has to hear how his wife is being incarcerated. She's not getting her proper medical treatment. How they harassing Nuwaupians because they don't overstand our culture. They never wanted to overstand it. It ain't in their nature to overstand it, and they knew that we had reclaimed our land. And the torture that they gave him in order to take that plea, all of them were involved. They didn't say that on the YouTube section. Them fake posts, they don't have no knowledge of that. They're caught up in what the Kakasu puts on. The moment he puts on television his small snippet of what they want you to know, then all of a sudden that becomes law, and that's what it is. No, it's not what it is. They was torturing him. He was sleeping on the floor with roaches and rats crawling across his feet. No medicine. They didn't give him a proper bed, blanket, extreme temperature tortures, hot and cold. You don't know what it's like in that cell when you have the air is on the air is cold air on in the middle of winter, or the heat is on in the middle of summer, where prisoners have to take wet toilet tissue and throw it against the vent so it can dry, and it keeps the vents closed. That's a fact. They have those things. They get taught, and the Edenton police, the people who locked him up, Putnam County, Jones County, Clayton County, all of these counties he's been going through, and all of a sudden they wake him up 4 or 5 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning from not eating, not sleeping. His lawyer come in and say, "Listen, we got to go to court. You need to take this plea. If he take this plea, then your family will be released. You don't have to worry about nobody being hurt." And who doesn't know that how our master has sacrificed and will continue to sacrifice his life for us? So don't hand us Nuwaupians that. We know better. So he took that plea out of duress, but he never consented to their jurisdiction. That's why anyone that knows him knows he's never signed to any of those documents going into their courts, because they do not have jurisdiction over him. So this motion touches on that, and it's very powerful because they placed it on record. And what happened was that Judge Hugh Lawson, who was the judge in June 30th, that heard him stated, our president stated on record, which we can go into. I'll read it for those that never heard or never seen those transcripts or heard those transcripts from that from the trial. Attorney Ed Garland, Attorney Adrian Patrick, where they stated it in court. And he stated, I'm going to read first where Ed Garland stated it on record. Okay. It says, Mr. Garland speaking to the court. This is on, y'all should take notes. This is on June 30th, 2003 at 1:35. Case number 02-CR-27-1. For the U.S. government, it was Max Woods, Richard Moultrie, Office of the United States Attorney General. And for our president, it says defendant here, but he's not defendant. He's our president. Edward T.M. Garland, Mono Bear Singh Aurora, and the Garland Samuel and Loeb firm in Atlanta, Georgia. Mr. Garland, Your Honor, at this time, I'm reading the transcript from that day. Before Mr. York answers the question posed by the court, whether he withdraws his plea or does not withdraw his plea, I would move the court to deal with the motion on competency to assist counsel and to proceed under these proceedings. Proceed with these proceedings. I would ask the court for an indulgence for a moment, if I may, before going into that motion, and allow a process to take place. If Your Honor would, and that is to allow me to place into the record Mr. York's position about these proceedings. Are you going to make the court? Are you going to make it, or is he? I will make the position known that he requested me to make known to the court. The court says, how long is that going to take, Mr. Garland? This will take about, I would say, 90 seconds. The court says, all right, proceed. Mr. Garland. Secondly, Mr. York would like to be briefly heard from. I will not hear Mr. York at this point. All right, Your Honor, the court. Now, as I said earlier, listen to me. The court is speaking. I told him earlier that I will hear him reasonably when the business of the court with respect to the questions is concluded. I'm not going to deviate from that. Mr. Garland, before Mr. York is called upon to make his decision as to the withdrawal of the plea, we wish to place on the record the caveat and objection to the proceedings of the court, and that is that the defendant is a member of a sovereign nation under United States Resolution 215, 1993. Quote, the draft declarations of the rights of indigenous people cited in E/1994/2/edition.1, 1994, page 1, which states, recognizing the urgent need to respect and promote the indigenous rights and characteristics of indigenous peoples, especially their rights to their lands, territories, and resources which derive from political, economic, and social structures, and from their culture, spiritual traditions, histories, and philosophies, convinced they're controlled by indigenous people over developments affecting them and their lands, territories, and resources, will enable them to maintain and strengthen their institutions, cultures, and traditions, and to promote their development in accordance with the aspirations and needs. Having placed that position of the defendant in the record of the court, my client wishes to know whether or not a document which he has furnished to me has been sent to or filed with the court. It is a document. If I may pass it up to the court, if I could determine that on record. I do not have the file before me. I do not know what's been filed and what has not. Let me ask you this just a minute. This is the court. Let me ask you this. Is this document that you are submitting as counsel? No, Your Honor. I'm just inquiring whether or not. Are you tendering this document? Mr. Garland, I'm trying. My client wishes to know whether this document has been filed in the court in his case. Now, this document is the blueback. The blueback document that was signed and accepted by the government of the United States. And this blueback acknowledges, this blueback is not, it doesn't acknowledge, but the government acknowledged the blueback. Let me correct that. The blueback presented by our president, which places the U.S. and any other government official body, logging it into their courts of who he is, his position, and his stance as a sovereign secure party to the world. It was a blueback that was presented. And this is the document that Ed Garland is referring to when he says, are you tendering this document? I'm trying. My client wishes to know whether this document has been filed. Well, you're a member of the bar of the court, Mr. Garland. Yes, Your Honor. The court. You have a license to practice law. You know where the clerk's office is. You know where the files are kept. Why don't you make that investigation on your own time? Let's move forward. Mr. Garland. All right, Your Honor. My client requests to know whether the court has seen a particular document, which I'm not even going to address that now, Mr. Garland. Mr. Garland, I understand the court's ruling. The court, all right, Your Honor, in light of that, at this time, we would ask the court to take up the issue of the competency hearing. Okay, we're going to move down where he states it on record. That's where he states it on record. Mr. Aurora comes in and he says, Mr. Aurora, will you make, excuse me, hold on one second, family. Pardon me, I had a small interruption. I understand the court's ruling. Your Honor, in light of that, at this time, we would ask the court to take up the issue of the competency hearing. This is Mr. Aurora speaking. Mr. Aurora will make that presentation. Mr. Aurora. Judge, based on your initial statements that you're receptive to it, do you need argument, or is that something that the court is inclined to do based on its observation? The court, I'll be glad to hear anything you wish to reasonably present. Mr. Aurora, Judge, we filed a brief with regards to the competency issue about a week or so ago. That is the earlier brief you, the court, is that the earlier brief you filed? Yes, Your Honor. It deals with the criminal, it deals with regards to, under Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure, outlines all portions that I've listed. Basically, there's an issue with regards to competency, but also the assistance of counsel based on my client's position, talking about our president, as far as not being subjected to the jurisdiction of the court. He's stating it again on record, Aurora. As far as not being subjected to the jurisdiction of the court. Therefore, not proceeding with these or going forward with these proceedings as far as assisting counsel if and when there is a trial in this matter. The court says, I'm sorry, I don't understand. First error. There's many errors, but this is the error where he says he doesn't understand. This is his way of trying to wiggle out of the acknowledgement of the position of our president, Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, placing on record. So the court erroneously says, I don't understand, which violates his office, violates his constitutional oath and his government that he has complete knowledge of the law. He cannot say he doesn't understand, and he uses it quite often in this transcript. Mr. Aurora says, Your Honor, you've already heard with what regard to what my client's position is. To be honest with you, I did not understand it. I heard what Mr. Garland said, but I'm not sure that I understand it. Mr. Aurora, basically my client says that he is his own sovereign nation based on his membership with a tribal American Indian nation. He cited some of the provisions that they filled with the United Nations charters, and therefore his contention is not only is he a sovereign person, he is also a secure party under the state law of Georgia. Those are the pleadings that Mr. Garland was trying to show the court. I don't know if they've been filed with this court or not, and as such, his contention is that he should be transferred over to the Native American tribe that he's a member of, where he can be tried for alleged crimes there and not here, since he feels that he is not subjected to the laws of the United States or this court. He's not going forward as far as assisting counsel. So he did not have attorney then. This is what Aurora is saying, that Mr. York, Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, our president, His Excellency, is not moving forward with the assistance of this counsel because the court did not have jurisdiction and does not have jurisdiction of him. With regards to his preparation in this trial before this court, because his position is that he is not subjected to the jurisdiction of the court. The positions that he has made are one of the reasons we are asked for the competency issue. We're also asking that the second prong is he is completely unable or unwilling to assist counsel based on his position. What basically Aurora was trying to say was that we don't know if he's competent to stand trial based on his positions as made his claim as a sovereign nation, sovereign indigenous secure party. And those are the positions, this quoting back Aurora again, and those are the positions I put forward in my brief, Your Honor. And I think, well, let me ask you this, Mr. Aurora. Are you telling me, the scare tactic coming in now, check this out. Are you telling me as a counsel for this man and as an officer of the court that you believe these positions you are presenting to the court have legal merit? Mr. Aurora, Judge, based on what I've seen in my limited time reviewing these documents, I know the court made us aware of some of these documents. A lot of them deal with UCC and common law type issues that I'm not familiar with. I do not know if there's merit or not merit with these positions. The court, Mr. Aurora. Okay, that's where he stands. That's where it stops. Well, that's where it stopped in this document. There's also, we'll move on to the next statement where our president speaks, and this is very, very important. I think we need to pay attention to this particular part of it so we'll know where our president is coming from and the position that he's in now and taking his fight, the good fight, all the way.